All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our second October Roundtable for the month. And today we will be having a conversation about having difficult conversations in the classroom, especially with all the upcoming elections and discussions that have been coming up across campus. So I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Louisa from TLTC, and I will let her take it away as we navigate the next hour together.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, Louisa from the TLTC She Hers program, She Hers pronouns. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about navigating sensitive topics in the classroom and offering some practical strategies that should be able to help you when sensitive topics come up, and especially when they're unexpected. So something that I wanted to talk about was the fact that as instructors, there's a balance between academic freedom and our classroom realities. So we want students and yourself as an instructor to have academic freedom and the right to free speech, but you want to do that while ensuring that there's still a respectful and inclusive classroom environment. So keeping that in mind, we know that there can be challenges with sensitive topics in any course. UNIV 100 is not a government and politics course where it might seem natural to talk about political issues, especially with the election coming up, but students might have questions or make comments. We're navigating academic freedom with a supportive and inclusive classroom environment. And today's focus is practical classroom strategies to kind of help you feel better prepared to handle those challenges when they come up. And something I also wanted to share is a little bit about social unrest, because the time that we're in now leading up to the election and with other world events happening, it relates to social unrest. So this refers to periods of significant societal disruption and conflict, typically characterized by things like protests, demonstrations, and other forms of collective action. It includes events such as elections, any political turmoil, wars, and incidents of police brutality. It also includes events that can occur within educational institutions, such as any incidents that might occur at a university or college, and any subsequent protests against university policies or actions. So social unrest can be stressful and a little overwhelming to think about because it can contribute to a charged atmosphere that permeates classrooms, and it can impact both teaching and learning dynamics. But social unrest is also an opportunity to raise awareness about certain issues, drive positive change, and hopefully foster a sense of empowerment and engagement. So social unrest can impact teaching and learning environments in different ways. So there are emotional and psychological impacts. So stress and anxiety can be increased for students, staff, and instructors, and that can affect mental health, which can affect things like engagement and motivation in the classroom. So as an example, if a student is really stressed about something going on in the world that's causing social unrest and they're typically very engaged, they might be more withdrawn. Um, any discussions on sensitive topics related to social unrest can sometimes become heated or lead to conflict, and that can affect the typical classroom dynamics. With attendance and participation, if there are protests or demonstrations on campus, near where a student lives, that could affect attendance because maybe they want to avoid a certain area of campus where your class might be being held. Or maybe if something's happening close to home, they might not want to leave home to come to campus if they're a commuter student. So thinking about how you can accommodate absences and still keep students engaged and up to date with the content. With curriculum relevance and adaptation, there's an opportunity to maybe include content or case studies or discussions related to recent events to kind of help students contextualize the event and its impact. And then also being mindful of any institutional responses. Maybe because of social unrest or other things happening, the institution might offer the option to hold classes that are usually in person online, or maybe cancel classes, or maybe increase counseling service for students, which are things that you'll want to become aware of so you can communicate them to your students. And then next here, just some reminders I wanted to share before I jump into our content. It's normal to feel prepared or uncertain when you're thinking about how you want to discuss or handle anything that comes up related to current events, such as the election. It can be very stressful or overwhelming, especially if a comment or question just really catches you off guard. So the strategies I'm going to share today, I hope will emphasize the point that you don't need all of the answers immediately, and taking time to pause and be intentional about how you respond is important. I've had a lot of discussions over the years with instructors across campus who feel like pausing to take a moment to decide how to handle something feels like it takes away from your authority or credibility or respect that students give you as an instructor. But I see it as a way of showing that you're being intentional so that you can respond in the most effective way and in a way that will mitigate any harm to you or your students. So I hope that you'll all be able to view pausing and taking a moment to make a decision as something that shows intentionality. So next I'll talk about three specific options to navigate sensitive or difficult topics in the classroom, especially when you're caught off guard by them. And those three options are to carry on, acknowledge and refer, or have a meaningful discussion. And the goal with these strategies is to help you feel more confident and prepared when managing conversations about sensitive topics by giving you a range of options to choose from so that based on your comfort level and the situation, you can choose the option that you feel will be best. So the first option is carry on. This allows you to focus on the course and the lesson for that day and address any comments or questions next class. So this is best to use when maybe a topic, comment, or question is completely unrelated, or you're unprepared to engage in a way that you feel is meaningful and effective. So what you would do if you choose this option is acknowledge the comment or question briefly, and then focus on the lesson for the day and come back to it later. So this is an example of something you might say to your class. I'm still processing your comments and reactions to the latest news coverage about the upcoming election, and I need some time to gather my thoughts before we discuss this. So for today, let's continue with our planned lesson, and we'll discuss this next class. So you've made it really clear to the students that you need some time to process their comments and gather your thoughts so that you can have a discussion in an effective way. So they know that you care and that you want to be better prepared for having a discussion. So that is strategy or option one. The next one is acknowledge and refer. This works well when a topic or comment or question brought up by students is important, but you don't feel the need to address it fully during class time, or you feel that other people addressing it for them would be better. So this is best to use when a comment or question is really important, but just not for your specific class or that specific session that day. So what you'll do is acknowledge what the students said and then provide resources or opportunities for external discussions. So an example for this is I can see that the news about the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza is affecting many of you. There's a campus town hall meeting this afternoon where you can discuss these issues further, and I have a list of resources to share if you need additional support. So you're letting them know that this campus town hall, which in this scenario we're assuming has experts, is a better place to go because those experts can tell you more about the issue and answer your questions. But if you can't make it to that town hall, I'm going to send you some resources for additional support. So you're validating students' concerns without taking away from your course content and the lesson that day, and you're not completely ignoring the fact that this is important to them. The next strategy is to have a meaningful discussion. So whether the topic or comment or question brought up relates to the course or not, if you're feeling prepared to devote class time to a discussion, then this is an option that you can choose. And a tip for that is to use some structured and open-ended questions so that you're inviting students with different perspectives to share what they're thinking and feeling. So in an example where something that's happening in the world is directly related to the course, you could say something like, I can see that the recent event is affecting many of you. Let's take some time to discuss how this connects to our course material. How can some of our readings help us understand what's happening in the broader context? Or if the issue is not related to the course, like maybe something about the election that the students might ask in UNIV 100, you can say, I understand that this issue is important to you all. Let's spend some time discussing how it's impacting us, and then we'll move to today's material. And you can say something like, what are you all thinking and feeling right now about this recent news or about the comment that was just made, to kind of open the floor to them. And before we end, I'll share a handout that has some more of these prompts and some open-ended questions that you might be able to use to start the discussion. And if you are ever pre-planning a meaningful discussion on a sensitive topic based on student comments and questions, you can always reach out to the TLTC, and the team and I are happy to meet with you one-on-one and kind of talk about the things that students are bringing up in your class and help you kind of brainstorm and prepare to hold that discussion. And then in addition to these three options here, I also wanted to share some other practical strategies that can help you navigate sensitive topics. The first one is to pause for reflection, especially when you're caught off guard, to even think about which of those three options I shared previously will work best for you. It's okay to just take some time to pause and gather yourself and figure out which option you would be most comfortable implementing. So if a student asks a question or says a comment that catches you off guard, you can say like, that's a great question or an insightful comment. I want to think more about the best way to address what you said. So let's all take a 5-minute break. And then after the 5-minute break is over, I'll let you know the best way to proceed. And again, I think that's something that shows a lot of intentionality on your part instead of just rushing to choose a strategy that may not be the best for you and students in the moment. Another practical strategy is to set ground rules for respectful dialogue with your students. So at the beginning of the semester, working collaboratively with students to ask them, what would make you feel brave and comfortable and safe having some discussions in this class about sensitive topics, and what are some norms in terms of what we all need from each other to create a classroom environment to have these discussions. And then if you choose the option to have a meaningful discussion about something, you can go back to the norms as a reminder and have everyone think about them as you're getting into the discussion. Structured dialogue approaches like small group discussions or think, pair, share are a really good strategy to use, because I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes for students to say the right thing or to say what they're thinking in the best way. And it can be a lot to just have to say something in front of the class, or especially if you have a very, very big class. So if you put students into small groups or pair them up, and give them a few minutes to talk about something in those small groups, it can help them be more comfortable engaging with the whole class and sharing their thoughts in front of everyone. The next strategy is something called a parking lot. So maybe creating an anonymous Google form or an ungraded survey in Canvas where if you choose the option to acknowledge and refer or to carry on and come back to something later, students can submit those questions to you somewhere so that you can keep them in mind when you're ready to have a discussion and talk more about their questions. And then another really important one, I think, is exit slips. So after a tough or emotional discussion, you can just ask students to write on a piece of paper what they learned, any questions or concerns they have, and how they're feeling. This can help you kind of gauge their emotional state after that sensitive topic discussion and let you know how to best follow up. That was all of the content and strategies that I had to share. And in the time that we had left, I was hoping we could talk through some scenarios related to the upcoming election that could happen in the classroom based on things that instructors across campus have come to the TLTC for support with or have happened in past years, and to answer any questions that you all might have. So before we would go into the scenarios, are there any questions or thoughts or comments about anything that I shared? Okay. I'm going to stop my screen share and then give you all a link to the scenarios. So give me a second to do that. Right. You should be able to access that link. It's a Google slide deck that has 3 scenarios. These are things that have happened to instructors on campus around election season. So based on the strategies and things I shared, I thought it would be helpful for us to kind of talk through these scenarios together and share a little bit about the way that you would respond to the situation or handle it, or any questions that you have about the way that you might handle it. So I think maybe I can give y'all a couple of minutes just to kind of read through the scenarios, and then we can go through each of them one by one and then talk about them a little bit if that works for everyone. Oh, you're muted.
I think that sounds great, like a great idea.
Okay, cool. So maybe we'll come back together at 12:25 so everyone has time to read and process a little bit, and then I will go fill up my water and come back by then. Okay. So we'll start by talking about scenario 1. So this is a scenario where class is getting ready to start and you walk in on a conversation with students where they're discussing how they're still undecided about who to vote for in the election. One student says, "It's my first time voting and I want to make an informed choice, but I'm not sure I understand where each candidate stands on the issues." Another student agrees and turns to you and asks, "How did you decide who to vote for your first time? We don't know much about the candidates' policies. Can you give us some info about where they stand?" How do you all think you would respond to students if that situation happens?
I can start. So
Sure.
this seemed to be the easiest scenario for me because it was just easy to be honest and kind of explain how I did it my first time and how I fumbled through it, but what I probably would have done differently and talk to them about resources they can look to find out information for themselves. I definitely
Hmm.
wouldn't be like, well, here's where they stand because I'm no expert. Like, this is something we need to
Hmm.
figure out and learn the skills for ourselves.
Yeah. So kind of like a combination approach, telling them how you navigated things your first time, and then also referring them to some outside resources to kind of like give them some autonomy to find out what they need to know.
Hmm.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Renee. And I see comments in the chat. Anna says, I'd commend the student on wanting to educate themselves prior to making such a big decision. Absolutely. Share that before you voted, you took time to read verified sources and not just vote based on what my friends and family were saying. I wanted to be sure it was my personal decision based on my own beliefs, and Terp's vote has resources to review candidate platforms. I think especially for first year students, telling them about verified sources and to not just vote based on what family and friends are saying is really important, because this is a time in their life where they're figuring out what things they learned from their family they want to keep doing and what things they might maybe want to change. So I think that's great. And I didn't know about Terp's vote, so I'll have to look into that. Any other thoughts on scenario 1 at all? And I'm wondering if any of you might have heard your students talking about the election at all, or if they've asked any questions so far in your sections this semester. Not yet. Okay. It's coming up really, really soon when I was just looking at the calendar earlier. So hopefully they're getting the info they need. Okay, if there's nothing else about scenario 1, we can talk about number 2. So as class is beginning, you hear students talking among themselves in small groups when a student suddenly exclaims, I just don't get how anyone could vote for that candidate. They're awful. And then another student responds, well, actually, that candidate is the only one who's going to fix this mess, and anyone who disagrees doesn't know what they're talking about. And then a third student jumps in, and it kind of becomes a heated debate with more students joining in, voices getting loud, and there's conflict happening. What would you do if this happened? And it does happen in some classrooms on campus.
I'm fine jumping in again. So
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, I did have this happen in class actually.
Okay.
And it depends on what the class vibe is. That class at that time, I actually just let them argue it out, and they all eventually were able to have a heated debate, but there was good
Mhm.
discussion. And then we kind of closed it out about everybody has opinions, everyone has views, and we turned it into kind of a values exercise of we all
Cool.
come with different views based on our values and thinking about where those values came from and are those still the values we want to bring forward and all like that. With my current class, I'd probably end the conversation, like bring it back down the anger and then try to
Mhm.
like refocus because my current group, I'm not sure would be able to do that same type of exercise.
Okay.
But yeah,
When
this
this
one was
happened,
hard.
before, what made you want to let the students just kind of sort it out for themselves? I'm assuming it's because you just knew them well and maybe knew they would be able to kind of find a way to resolve it. But yeah, just
Yeah.
curious about your thought process.
Yeah. I've taught UNIV for a couple of years now, and I've taught a couple other courses. And it really depends on your group and what the vibe is with the group.
Mhm.
With that group previously, there were a couple of very knowledgeable voices that did seem to be because we had similar debates, not just around politics, but
Mhm.
we got one around gender and is gender actually a thing? And there was some very
Mhm.
heated sides on that of my religion says this, and um, we were again able to just bring them back. So depending on if I feel like there are voices in the room that can be heard and valued and actually hear each other instead of just getting angry and having upset and hurt feelings.
Mhm. Okay. So knowing a little bit about the students and their communication style and what their knowledge is on the topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Any other thoughts? I see Anna in the chat. You said this is the scenario that you're worried about.
I think for me, I'd probably be like in a similar place as Anna, where I'm like, I feel like my first concern would be like helping students bring their anger down, because I feel like no
Mhm.
productive conversation can really be had in anger or frustration. And that can lead
Mhm.
to people saying things that they don't really mean, which can
Mhm.
cause a rupture in the overall class, considering you have the
Mhm.
rest of the semester to get through as well.
Yes.
Um, so I feel like my main focus would kind of be like how like getting the class under control, whether that's like having everyone take a break, like a 5 minute break or something like that, go take a walk, go grab some water, go grab a snack. Like I would hate to say that, like I'd be like, okay, y'all, let's pull it together. But I feel like that's like what my natural instinct would be, to be like
Mhm.
almost like a shock to the classroom, to be like, okay, I understand this is important, but then maybe utilize one of the techniques that you were talking about earlier, like pausing
Mhm.
and then either coming back to the conversation if it's something that I think can be utilized, especially in UNIV 100, where the
Mhm.
like the biggest purpose is transition to the university. So like reworking the
Mhm.
rest of the class to kind of incorporate this conversation so students feel comfortable coming back next week to the class, because
Mhm.
UNIV 100 is a community space and we want to make sure
Right.
everyone has an opportunity to be heard during that.
Mhm. Yeah, I like what you said about kind of just like bringing the anger down a little bit, because in this situation, this happens at the beginning of class. So I would probably opt to take a break, but before taking a break, telling students like things seem really tense. It seems that there are a lot of heated emotions. This topic is important, and I want us to be able to talk about it in a respectful way. So let's take a break. You can leave the room if you want to, write down any comments or questions you want to make sure we talk through. And I just need to kind of think about a way to continue this important discussion in an effective and respectful way and kind of go from there. And I think as an instructor, telling the students the emotions you're noticing in the room can make them feel more comfortable knowing that it's okay to have those emotions. But we also need to find a way in the classroom space to still be respectful of everyone and be comfortable with sharing perspectives and listening to perspectives that are different from our own. And hoping that the students will, you know, try their best to really be respectful.
Just kind of want to say and like get your take. I'm concerned too, depending on like things we hear, keeping myself in check and my emotions in check, and then making sure that I'm still in the right space to gain control over the class again. So I think the break is really good for all of us because I personally am concerned about my own feelings as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I know some instructors who will actually take up to like a 10-15 minute break and just tell students, like, this is important to all of you. It's important to me too. And I feel a responsibility to have this discussion in the most effective way. So I just need to take some time to breathe and think about the best way to do this so that none of us are harmed in the process of talking about this. And I remember an instructor who's been here for, I've been on campus for 6 years, and this instructor started the same time as me. And when I suggested that approach to her, in an initial consultation, she was like, yeah, right. I would never do that and take 10 minutes away from my class because that just makes me look unprepared. But in a situation that got heated, she was like, I remembered you told me that and I did it. And it was really good for me and good for the students. And we were able to have a good discussion after that. So I think just really as uncomfortable as it is in the moment, really taking the break that you need to make a decision and figure out what's best for you. There's a lot of content out there now about something called pedagogical wellness, which is the fact that instructors want to teach students and care for them in the classroom as we're teaching and helping them learn, but you also need to take care of yourself. So if there are things you need to do with your teaching and course design processes that prioritize your own wellness so that you can better care for the students, kind of getting comfortable with the fact that it's okay to do that, which again is hard because I think we're kind of taught that it's not okay. You're the instructor, you're the expert in the room, you hold all of the power. You should automatically know how to handle everything. But in a conversation with a friend the other day, she mentioned struggling with something in a new role at work. And her boss told her, like, we're all humans living on earth and living in society for the first time. So it's okay if you need to figure something out or you don't know the right approach to something. And she said that that's really helped her remember, like, yeah, if I need to ask for support or take a second before I handle something, that's okay because I'm experiencing this exact moment for the first time. Any other thoughts or questions or concerns about a situation like this? I know it's scary and stressful to think about how you might handle it. Right, if not, we can talk about the last one. So something that comes up a lot is that even if your class isn't related to specific topics, students may just see you as an individual and the classroom space you've cultivated as a safe space to have certain discussions. So in this situation, a student raises their hand and says, "I'm sorry this is off topic, but I've been really stressed about the election. It feels like no matter who wins, things are going to get worse, and I don't know how to handle it. This is the only class I have where I feel like it's safe to share this." Several other students agree. The atmosphere starts to feel heavy, and the conversation shifts towards concerns and feelings of helplessness. So, how do you think you would handle a situation like this?
I think for me, I would first want to like recognize that I'm happy that I've cultivated such a space for students to be comfortable to share because I know that
Mhm.
it's not easy to talk about any of
Right.
the stuff in classroom. So the fact that a student has enough trust in me and the culture that I've created to feel comfortable like sharing their concerns and stuff with me, I feel like that's very helpful. And then I think in addition to that, since we're in charge of the TA class, like a lot of these times, these sorts of things kind of pop up. I think first, like what Anna was saying, like validating their concerns and recognizing that
Mhm.
this is going to be, regardless of what happens, it's going to be significant change in the way that our society functions, and that their
Yeah.
feelings and their concerns and thoughts about the way that's going to handle is okay and valid, and they should do whatever it takes in order to kind of care for themselves during that time. And so
Mhm.
instead of like allowing the conversation to continue in towards a form of like helplessness, kind of helping students come up with like tips and tricks to kind of care for themselves during that time, I think
Yeah.
it's important because that initial week, I feel like that initial 2 weeks after the election will be hard on any and everybody, regardless of what the results are. So kind of having like an
Yeah.
opportunity for them to talk about resources or tools that not only the university has, but that they can do on their own time outside of that, I think might be really
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to handle it. And I like what um, Anna said in the chat about validating their concerns and sharing that you have similar concerns as well. So they know that it's okay to feel that way. I think something, depending on the specific concerns that they raise, I might eventually try to shift the conversation towards like an action oriented approach. Like, what can we do for ourselves and our families and friends and loved ones? What can we do on this campus? What can we do um, as citizens in this society to maybe make changes to some of the things that we're worried about or bring awareness to them? Because I think sometimes we have a lot more power than we think we do just to make changes, even in very small ways. So maybe having students think about that just to kind of shift a little bit away from the feeling of helplessness, which I think is really easy to sit in for a while. Do y'all have any other thoughts about this scenario? Any of the other ones that you are thinking might come up that would be helpful to talk about? Oh, and while everyone's thinking, I want to make sure I give you a link to a handout that I have that I think it's just kind of like a one pager handout of the things that I shared that you might want to refer back to.
I have a question. Do you think it would be better for like us, like us and the rest of the UNIV 100 instructors to start preparing for these conversations now? Like, is it, you think it's important for us to kind of like have it more as like a preventative, like, hey, we know that this is coming up, like dedicating time in class? And if so, is there a certain way that that should be structured to kind of encourage the things that you were talking about?
Mhm. I think any situations you think might come up would be helpful to discuss as a group and have people kind of think about how they might handle them. And I also think if there are any sections of the class happening on election day or the day after, a couple of days after, figuring out how you might want to hold space for students to kind of debrief the election results, how they're feeling about. I feel like either way, there's just going to be a lot in the news, a lot happening, in this area, in the country, in the world, depending on, what the outcome is. So just providing space and time for students to share their thoughts and kind of reflect, I think would be helpful. I even have some faculty learning communities happening the day after the election, and I already asked them, like, would you like to use like the first half of our session just to kind of hold space and debrief whatever the election results are? And they all said that they're open to that, but also depending on how things go, they might reach out and say that they're not coming or we should cancel or reschedule. So kind of considering some of those things as well.
I also know that there was a concern about whether or not they should have class, like
I
following
know.
to that. Like, do you have class? Because I also know that there were concerns of like if the outcome was to go a certain way, some people might feel like more encouraged to have class, but if it was like the opposing candidate who might not share their same ideas and stuff like that, they might feel inclined to cancel class, but students might need that space. Do you have any recommendations on how to navigate that?
Yeah, that's tough. In so what I did one time, like last fall semester, there was unfortunately a student death on campus. I canceled the regular class session for that day, but I told students I will be in the classroom for the entire class time. If you want to stop by, if you want to talk to me, I'll talk to you. If you just want to sit in the room and have someone else to sit with, I'll be there. So not having the actual class session, but just holding space, I think is helpful. But if it's a situation where maybe you wanted the election to go one way and it didn't go your way, but you think a lot of your students might be happy with how things went, I would say for your wellness, I would probably cancel the class session if that's what you need on that day to take time to process. Let's see, Anna. Anna has to hop off. Did this by accident one week of the semester where I do individual check-ins, and that week I'll have one-on-ones. This will allow me to talk about this with students who want to debrief, but not in the entire class space. Yeah, not intentional, but I'm glad it works out that way for you, Anna. That sounds great. Yeah, it's just really difficult to decide what to do, and I'm also wondering what guidance we might get, like from academic affairs and the provost office, and guidance the TLTC might get from the provost office to give to instructors. Because yeah, I just think regardless of what happens, the outcome is going to be difficult for everybody in some way, probably. And with a class like UNIV 100, it's one credit and there's a lot to cover and it goes by quickly. Um, yeah. Also, maybe checking in with students, and seeing kind of how what they're thinking and feeling about the election, and letting them know like these are options for election week. So be prepared to have class. Maybe be prepared for class to be canceled or to move to Zoom, or just let them know what the different options could be so that they're prepared.
Thank you for holding this session and for
Sure.
just bringing these topics up because it is very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, and time is like October just started, but it's going to be over soon, and then it's going to be election day. And I try to remain hopeful, but I'm just also kind of nervous about like, what's going to happen. So, and for the first year students, for a lot of them, it's their first time voting. So, you know, I just wonder how like it's going to impact them, like regardless of the outcome, how will they feel about the process, about voting, and maybe they'll pay more attention to the news and watching for the results for the first time, and what they're I taught a section of the Grand Challenges course last election, and students were saying that they had conflict with their roommates and needed to like not stay in their rooms because they had opposing political beliefs with their roommates and friends and things like that. So a lot can come up.
All right, I guess like as just one last question, is there any other
Sure.
additional resources or tips or tricks that you would recommend to instructors in preparing for the next few weeks coming up with it? I know we talked about a lot already, but like if you had one thing that everyone should kind of know beforehand.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling up a resource. The University of Michigan has a great dialogue facilitation program, and we have a new intergroup dialogue center here on campus. But University of Michigan has this great resource called Useful Questions for Dialogue Facilitation. And I think just having this list of questions and kind of looking at it and getting ideas for things that you can ask students can kind of help you in the moment if you're not sure about what to say to keep the conversation going or shift the direction of the conversation. Like I think in the summary questions part, there's a prompt of like, okay, this is what I've heard so far from everyone. This is what I'm hearing. Does anyone have anything to correct or anything to add? I think sometimes with conversations about sensitive topics, students can unintentionally be offensive or prejudiced or discriminatory in some of the things they say. So if you tell them, this is what I'm hearing from you, is that correct? That can give them the opportunity to change what they said if hearing it out loud helps them recognize that it didn't come across in the way they intended. So I think just having some of these open-ended questions in your back pocket can be really helpful, and they've been helpful to me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Louisa. I
Sure.
appreciate you taking the time to talk with our instructors. And instructors, if you have any questions or concerns in preparation for the next few weeks or just in general, please feel free to email our transition programs email or Louisa and the TLTC. They have great resources at your disposal to kind of help navigate conversations in the classroom. But thank you all so much again for being here with us today. You all have a great rest of your day. And Louisa, once again, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.